She had changed her name, her appearance, even her fingerprints through military connections that didn't officially exist. For 8 years, Maria had successfully hidden from everyone who might recognize the most decorated female combat pilot in U.S. history. But when the helicopter crashed in the mountains during the worst storm in decades, when they played her old squadron's emergency frequency over the diner's radio, she heard something that made her blood freeze, her daughter's voice calling for help from the wreckage. The daughter who thought her mother had died a hero 8 years ago was about to discover that some warriors never truly leave the battlefield. Before we continue this story of impossible choices and deadly secrets, tell me in the comments from which city in the world are you watching this video today? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button to support the channel. The coffee was always fresh at Eddie's Diner, even at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday night when the Montana wind howled through the empty parking lot like a living thing. Maria Santos wiped down the same counter she had cleaned every night for 6 years, her movements automatic and precise. The graveyard shift suited her perfectly. Fewer questions, fewer curious glances, fewer chances for someone to look too closely at the woman who officially didn't exist. Her appearance had been carefully crafted to disappear into small-town anonymity. The graying hair that she kept pulled back in a simple ponytail was actually dyed to hide the natural black that might trigger recognition. The reading glasses perched on her nose served no medical purpose, but changed the shape of her face enough to fool facial recognition software. Even her posture had been altered, a slight hunch that made her appear smaller, older, less threatening than the ramrod-straight military bearing that had once commanded respect in the most dangerous airspace on Earth. The customers who frequented Eddie's Diner knew her as Rita, the quiet cook who made perfect coffee and never engaged in small talk beyond weather and local sports. They saw a middle-aged woman who had probably lived in Montana her entire life, who understood the rhythms of truck drivers and shift workers, who kept the grill running and the coffee hot without drama or complications. None of them suspected that Rita was actually Major Maria Elena Santos, the first woman ever to lead Apache helicopter strike missions in classified operations across 3 different theaters of war. None of them knew that she had logged over 3,200 combat flight hours, more than any female pilot in military history. Most importantly, none of them knew that according to official military records, Major Santos had been killed in action 8 years ago during a mission that officially never happened. The transformation from war hero to anonymous diner cook had been orchestrated by intelligence agencies that specialized in making people disappear. Maria's death had been carefully staged after she had witnessed something during her final mission that powerful people needed to stay buried. The closed casket funeral had been attended by her parents, her younger sister, and her 15-year-old daughter Jennifer, all of whom believed they were mourning a genuine loss. But Maria hadn't died in Afghanistan. She had been extracted, debriefed, and given a choice: accept a new identity and disappear forever, or face court-martial for treason charges that would destroy her family's reputation along with her own. The evidence against her had been fabricated, but it was airtight enough to ensure a conviction if the case ever went to trial. Her handlers had made it clear that cooperation meant safety for her family, while resistance meant catastrophe for everyone she loved. So Major Maria Santos had died, and Rita the night cook had been born from carefully forged documents and a past constructed by professionals who understood how to create ghosts. The transformation had been total and irreversible, designed to protect state secrets that could topple governments if they ever saw daylight. For 8 years, the system had worked perfectly. Maria had adapted to her new life with the same discipline that had made her an exceptional pilot. She learned to cook with the same precision she had once used to fire Hellfire missiles. She memorized her customers' preferences with the same attention to detail she had once applied to enemy positions and flight patterns. She built a routine that was both sustainable and completely forgettable. But some secrets are too dangerous to stay buried forever, and some voices carry across time and space with deadly precision. The storm had been building for 3 days, transforming the Montana mountains into a landscape that resembled the surface of an alien planet. Wind speeds exceeded anything the local weather service had recorded in over 50 years. Visibility dropped to near zero as snow fell horizontally, driven by gusts that could flip vehicles and ground aircraft with equal ease. Maria had been monitoring weather reports with the automatic attention of someone trained to assess flight conditions, even though she hadn't touched aircraft controls in 8 years. The storm was the kind that killed people who made poor decisions, the kind that separated experienced pilots from dead pilots with unforgiving efficiency. The emergency radio mounted beneath the diner's cash register usually carried routine traffic, minor accidents, medical calls, domestic disputes handled by overworked sheriff's deputies. But tonight, the radio crackled with the kind of urgent communications that made Maria's pulse quicken despite herself. A medical evacuation helicopter had gone down in the mountains, approximately 40 miles northeast of the diner. 3 people aboard, the pilot, a paramedic, and a patient being transported to the regional trauma center. The aircraft had been attempting to reach an emergency landing zone when it encountered wind shear that overwhelmed even the pilot's considerable skill. Search and rescue coordinators were scrambling to organize a response, but the storm conditions made any immediate rescue attempt virtually impossible. No helicopter in the region was rated for the wind speeds and visibility conditions currently battering the mountains. Even the military aircraft stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base had been grounded until the weather improved. Maria continued her cleaning routine, but her trained ear caught every detail of the radio traffic: flight paths, weather reports, terrain assessments, personnel availability. She processed the information automatically, her mind calculating approach vectors and risk factors, even as her conscious thoughts focused on staying invisible and uninvolved. But then the radio transmitted something that stopped her heart completely. The emergency frequency shifted to a channel that officially didn't exist, a frequency reserved for operations that never appeared in public records. Maria recognized it instantly because she had used it hundreds of times during missions that required coordination between agencies that didn't officially communicate with each other. The voice that came through the speakers was older now, strained by years and circumstances, but still unmistakably familiar. It belonged to someone Maria had trained, mentored, and ultimately protected during the final mission that had destroyed her official existence. Mayday, Mayday, this is Jennifer Chen, requesting immediate helicopter extraction for 3 personnel. GPS coordinates follow. Repeat, immediate helicopter extraction required. Jennifer Chen. Jennifer was her daughter's married name now, but 8 years ago she had been Jennifer Santos, a 15-year-old girl who had watched her mother's flag-draped coffin lowered into the ground while promising to follow in her footsteps and become a military pilot. Maria's hands began to shake as the horrible mathematics of the situation became clear. Her daughter had grown up, joined the military, become a pilot just as she had always planned. But something had gone wrong with her mission tonight, something serious enough to require emergency extraction using frequencies that shouldn't exist and protocols that were supposed to be buried with Operation Nightfall. The radio continued to broadcast desperate attempts to coordinate a rescue mission. Weather conditions were worsening by the hour. No civilian aircraft could safely attempt the flight, and military resources were either grounded or committed to other emergencies. The rescue coordinators were running out of options, and the people trapped in the mountains were running out of time. Maria reached beneath the counter and retrieved a small device that looked like an ordinary cell phone but contained communication equipment that could access networks invisible to civilian law enforcement. She had kept it for 8 years as insurance, never expecting to use it, but unable to completely abandon the connections that might someday mean the difference between life and death. The encrypted message she sent was brief and carefully worded. Ghost still hunting. Need immediate extraction support for downed bird in Montana Sector 7. Storm conditions severe. No official assets available. The response came within 90 seconds, appearing on the device's screen in text that would automatically delete after being read once. Negative. Ghost operations terminated permanently. No support authorized. Maintain cover. Maria stared at the message as it vanished from the screen, understanding the implications with devastating clarity. The people who had orchestrated her death and disappearance were willing to let her daughter die rather than risk exposing the secrets they had killed to protect. Official channels were closed. Military resources were unavailable. Her daughter and 2 other people were going to freeze to death in the Montana mountains because helping them would require acknowledging that Major Maria Santos was still alive. She walked to the diner's front window and stared out at the storm, watching snow accumulate against the glass in patterns that reminded her of the visibility conditions she had once navigated during night missions over enemy territory. The wind was getting stronger and the temperature was dropping steadily. Even with survival training, the people in that crashed helicopter had maybe 6 hours before hypothermia became fatal. Maria made her decision with the same cold calculation that had kept her alive through 3 different wars. She untied her apron, hung it on the hook beside the grill, and walked toward the door that led to the diner's small office. Hidden in a locked filing cabinet behind tax records and employee schedules was equipment that she had hoped never to use again. The flight suit was exactly where she had left it 8 years ago, vacuum-sealed in a container that had protected it from moisture and time. The helmet still bore the scratches from her final mission, and the patches had been carefully removed to eliminate any identifying marks. But the suit itself was functional, rated for extreme weather conditions, and designed to interface with aircraft systems that civilian pilots never touched. More importantly, hidden beneath false documentation in the same container were the authentication codes and clearance credentials that would allow her to requisition aircraft and support equipment without triggering official inquiries. The credentials were supposed to have been destroyed when Major Santos died, but Maria had kept them as final insurance against the possibility that her handlers might someday decide that even a dead ghost was too dangerous to leave alone. Getting to the crash site would require aircraft that could handle storm conditions beyond anything civilians were rated to fly. The only helicopter in the region with that capability was an MH-60 Black Hawk stationed at a classified facility that officially didn't exist, maintained for operations that never appeared in public records. Maria had flown that exact aircraft during training exercises that prepared her for missions in Afghanistan and Iraq. She knew its capabilities, its limitations, and most importantly, she knew the people responsible for maintaining it. People who might be willing to look the other way if the right person asked the right questions with the right credentials. But using those credentials would mean exposing herself to the same intelligence agencies that had orchestrated her death. It would mean admitting that she had violated the terms of her disappearance and maintained capabilities that were supposed to have been eliminated. It would mean putting herself back on the radar of people who had demonstrated their willingness to kill to protect their secrets. The alternative was letting her daughter die while maintaining a cover identity that had become more important than the life it was supposed to protect. Maria sealed the flight suit back in its container and reached for her phone. The number she dialed hadn't been used in 8 years, but she had memorized it during training that was designed to ensure survival in situations exactly like this one. The voice that answered was professionally neutral, revealing nothing about location or identity. Authentication required. Maria spoke a series of numbers and code words that identified her as someone who officially didn't exist, requesting support for an operation that officially wasn't happening. The response came after a pause that lasted exactly 15 seconds. Ghost Hawk 6, you are not authorized for operational status. Maintain cover protocols. Ghost Hawk 6 requesting immediate extraction support for family asset in distress. Storm conditions require specialized aircraft and crew. Another pause, longer this time. When the voice returned, it carried a different tone, one that suggested the conversation was being recorded and analyzed by people with the authority to make decisions that affected national security. Explain family asset designation. Maria closed her eyes and spoke the words that would either save her daughter's life or destroy the careful anonymity that had protected them both for 8 years. Asset is Jennifer Chen, formerly Jennifer Santos, operational pilot requiring emergency extraction from Montana Sector 7, storm conditions beyond civilian capability. The silence that followed stretched for nearly a minute. When the voice returned, it was accompanied by background noise that suggested secure communications being established with higher authority levels. Ghost Hawk 6, stand by for operational briefing. Aircraft will be available at coordinates to follow. Mission parameters classified. Success required. Maria felt something she hadn't experienced in 8 years. The cold clarity that came with accepting a mission that would either succeed completely or fail catastrophically. There would be no middle ground, no partial victory, no opportunity to retreat if conditions became untenable. She was going back to war, this time to save the daughter who thought she was dead. The coordinates transmitted to her phone identified a location 40 miles north of the diner, accessible by roads that were probably impassable in current weather conditions. Getting there would require the 4-wheel drive pickup truck she kept for emergencies, along with navigation skills that would challenge even her military training. But before she could attempt the rescue, Maria had to solve a problem that was potentially more dangerous than flying through a mountain storm. She had to get to the aircraft without being spotted by the intelligence operatives who were undoubtedly monitoring the situation. People who had spent 8 years believing she was dead would react aggressively to evidence that she was alive and operational. The pickup truck started on the second try, its engine responding to maintenance that reflected military precision rather than civilian indifference. Maria had kept the vehicle in perfect condition for 8 years, understanding that reliable transportation might someday mean the difference between escape and capture. Driving through the storm was like navigating through a combat zone where the enemy was weather rather than human opponents. Visibility dropped to less than 10 feet in some areas, forcing Maria to navigate by memory and instinct rather than visual landmarks. The wind rocked the truck with enough force to require constant steering corrections, and the road surface disappeared beneath snow that could hide ice, debris, or worse. But Maria had driven through worse conditions during training exercises that were designed to simulate the worst possible circumstances. She understood how to maintain control when traction disappeared, how to navigate when landmarks vanished, how to conserve fuel and maintain vehicle function when mechanical failure meant death. More importantly, she understood how to think like someone who was already dead, someone who had nothing left to lose except the people she loved most. The aircraft was exactly where the coordinates indicated, sitting on a landing pad that was invisible from any public road. The MH-60 Black Hawk appeared to be unguarded, but Maria knew that appearance was carefully designed to hide security measures that would neutralize unauthorized personnel with lethal efficiency. She approached the aircraft using authentication protocols that identified her as someone with legitimate access despite her official death status. The helicopter systems responded to her codes, acknowledging her credentials and initializing flight-ready status without triggering security alerts. But as Maria climbed into the pilot's seat and began the pre-flight checklist that would prepare the aircraft for the most dangerous mission of her career, she realized that someone else was watching her every move. Standing in the shadow of a maintenance building was a figure she recognized despite 8 years of separation. General Patricia Williams, the officer who had personally delivered Maria's death certificate and new identity, was observing the situation with the calculated attention of someone who understood exactly what was happening and why. Their eyes met across the distance that separated the aircraft from the building, and General Williams raised her hand in a gesture that was part salute and part benediction. No words were exchanged, no official communication established, but the message was unmistakably clear. The mission was authorized at the highest levels, and failure was not an option. Maria powered up the Black Hawk's engines and prepared to fly into the storm that would either reunite her with the daughter she had been forced to abandon or kill them both in the mountains that had already claimed too many lives. Some secrets were worth dying for, some lies were worth maintaining forever, but some truths were worth any price, even when that price included sacrificing the anonymity that had kept a ghost alive for 8 years. The helicopter lifted off into the Montana storm, carrying a dead woman toward a reunion that would either save a life or destroy everything she had built from the ashes of her former existence. Now I ask you, have you ever kept a secret so dangerous that revealing it could cost you everything? Have you ever had to choose between protecting yourself and protecting someone you love? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because here at the Human Stories channel, we believe that the most powerful choices are often the ones that no one ever sees. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and help us share these incredible tales of sacrifice, courage, and impossible decisions. We'll see you in the next one.